Okay, let's unpack this. We are diving into an archive of failure so profound, so absolute, that the sheer contradiction at its heart is what's maddening.
It really is. And for you, the listener, this isn't just a story about one person's financial trouble. It's a case study in just how fragile our systems can be.
Exactly. We are talking about Daniel Bates, who is the operational founder behind the 11SIX music ecosystem.
Right. And according to the documents we've analyzed, and we're talking about the hard numbers, the ones filed directly with the court, he hit a staggering total documented income peak of $170,942.
Just in 2022.
Just in a single year, yeah.
And this wasn't, some kind of fleeting cash. This wasn't a one-time windfall. This income peak was built on a foundation of professional dedication that spanned a decade.
Mm-hmm. We're looking at employment tenures of 9 years, 3 years, and then 11 years in these really critical high responsibility roles.
Things like warehouse supervisor, luxury suite attendant. This is the definition of stability. This is what he calls the ghost persona, right? The indispensable, highly organized employee who just makes things work.
And yet we have this catastrophic, almost unbelievable reality. That entire life, that entire creative superstructure he built collapsed utterly. And it collapsed because of his inability to make one single mandatory Chapter 13 plan payment.
And the number is just, it's what gets me.
It's only $630 per month.
$630.
Mm-hmm.
The tragedy isn't just the fall. It's how impossibly small the tripwire was. It was a mandatory debt service payment that, was a fraction of his peak monthly earnings.
Yeah.
And that's what broke an executive level persona.
That contradiction is the core of our deep dive today.
Right. Our mission is laser focused. We are analyzing the documented paper trail. We have the legal filings, the apartment ledgers, and crucially, the desperate real-time communication. We're talking emails, text messages.
A blow-by-blow account of the collapse.
Exactly. We're using it to trace the precise timeline. We want to move beyond just the emotion of it and analyze the sheer logistics of this collapse. We want to illustrate how creditor noncompliance and something we're calling logistical paralysis just transformed a manageable financial hurdle into total systemic ruin.
And if we step back to analyze the macro consequences, you can see this isn't just an isolated incident. This case study becomes this devastating portrait of how conventional civil pathways, things like unemployment benefits, federal bankruptcy protection,
The safety nets?
the very safety nets, yeah. The things that are supposedly designed to catch a falling citizen can instead financially accelerate their ruin. The complex infrastructure designed to catch him, it just failed to deploy. It left the human being completely exposed to the elements of pure logistics and, well, fate.
And we have extensive documentation. We're going to get into the minute-by-minute timeline of communication between him, his law firm, the apartment complex. It paints such a clear picture of institutional indifference.
It really does.
The goal here is to understand why a man who built such a stable life could find that stability so brittle, and why the system built to protect the vulnerable offered, in the end, zero action, zero defense, and frankly, zero care when he needed it the most.
Let's get into it.
To really understand the velocity of this fall, we first have to appreciate the height from which he fell. I think the first crucial step is establishing that baseline of stability he had, because it runs so counter to the image of, the chaotic artist.
The documents are unequivocally clear on this point. Daniel Bates demonstrated an extreme deviation from transience. I mean, he had consistent housing for 6 straight years. But specifically, and this is the number that just jumps off the page, he resided at the Preston Valley Apartments for 11 consecutive years.
11 years. Think about that. Over a decade in the same residence. Most people don't stay in a house they own for that long, let alone a rental.
Exactly. That level of residential commitment, when you pair it with his professional records showing these long employment tenures, 9 years in logistics, 11 in hospitality, it just proves he was designed for structure, for reliability.
He was the indispensable ghost employee, the one who stabilized the foundation. And that stability is what allowed the armor, his creative persona, DLB, to build the whole creative ecosystem.
And this deep stability is precisely what makes the trigger so devastating. That whole foundation was built on W-2 income. And when that income disappeared, the stability vanished almost instantly.
So what was the trigger point? What does the paper trail show us?
According to the documents, it was November 2024, specifically Thanksgiving Day. Daniel is fired from the tavern. He maintains the reasons were untrue, but regardless of the cause, the effect was immediate.
And this happens at the exact same time that 11SIX Music is having its operational launch.
The worst possible timing. So the sudden loss of income immediately initiated this acute financial strain.
And when that strain began, the very infrastructure of his life, specifically his primary residence, it turned against him with aggressive speed.
That's a perfect way to put it. The firing immediately caused missed car payments and, crucially, late rent payments.
What's fascinating here, and what the paper trail makes so clear, is how the apartment complex Preston Valley acted less like, I don't know, a service provider and more like an accelerator of his financial demise.
Oh, absolutely. They showed zero grace. Zero.
And we have documented proof of this. The complex repeatedly had his vehicle, a black 2021 Nissan Sentra, impounded. This is a crucial, specific financial mechanism of his failure.
It is. We have the specific tow dates from the apartment ledgers and his own records. We're talking December 12, 2023, and then it happens again on March 7, 2024. This shows a repeated, almost punitive financial drain that the complex inflicted on him.
Let's just analyze the economics of that for a second. A single tow and recovery. Even back then, what does that cost?
You're easily looking at anywhere from $400 to $800. So if he was towed twice in just a 3-month span, that's what, anywhere from $800 to $1,600 in immediate, unplanned, non-negotiable fees.
Money he absolutely did not have.
Precisely.
Yeah.
That capital, which he desperately needed for rent or utilities, was just consumed immediately, gone.
It's a death by 1,000 cuts scenario. But each cut is incredibly deep. He's forced to divert any available capital to simply recover his transportation. And he needs that car, right? It's essential for job searching, for just living.
This aggressive action by the complex consumed any funds he had. It took away any financial space he had to maneuver. It accelerated the velocity of his descent into debt.
It's like they were actively working against his attempts to stabilize.
It effectively took his small remaining liquidity and just flushed it directly to third-party tow truck operators. And all this was happening while Daniel was actively seeking new employment, constantly interviewing, and, waiting for that conventional safety net to deploy.
And that wait for systemic help. That's where the true chasm emerges, isn't it? He didn't secure a new job until March 2025. And in that gap, he was relying on unemployment to bridge it.
He was. And we reviewed the unemployment documentation from the Texas Workforce Commission, the TWC. And this paperwork, it tells the story of systemic indifference versus immediate pressing need.
So what did it show? What was he supposed to get?
His weekly benefit amount was calculated at a potential $591. Now, that benefit, if it had been deployed consistently, would have provided the necessary stability. It could have covered his obligations, potentially even that critical $630 Chapter 13 payment down the line.
But that's not what happened.
Not at all. The reality was vastly different. The TWC claim status we have shows $0 payments proposed for several weeks in February 2025.
$0.
Zero. We see specific entries for the weeks ending January 25th, February 1st, February 8th, and February 15th. All of them were processed around February 21st, and they all show a benefit of exactly $0.
So the system designed to provide this minimal safety net deployed zero cash right when he needed it most.
You see this immense structural time lag. His financial needs were immediate, but the state's bureaucracy moved at this glacial, non-responsive pace.
And that lack of cash, right when the apartment complex is aggressively targeting his one secured asset, his car, through these repeated impoundments, it just created this immediate, impossible financial crisis.
It really forces you to ask a critical question. I mean, if he had this long history of conventional W-2 employment, why wasn't the system better equipped to support him?
Was it the application process? Was it just so cumbersome? Or was the TWC just completely paralyzed by an administrative backlog?
The outcome is the same, regardless of the internal reason. The civil pathway failed to deploy, leaving him entirely exposed to the rapid, punitive actions of his creditors.
So his reliance on these conventional pathways, it actually made things worse.
It only served to accelerate his ruin. He spent time and energy on a TWC claim that yielded no immediate reward, while his own apartment complex was actively dismantling his material life one tow notice at a time.
The documents really reveal that the failure of that single, small W-2 income stream just exposed the rotten core beneath that, that impressive $170,000 peak he had achieved.
That peak income was built on fragile W-2 scaffolding. It wasn't built on a diversified personal asset base that was capable of absorbing these kinds of shocks.
It just paints a terrifying picture. Even stability, when it relies entirely on a single source of earned income, can be shockingly, terrifyingly brittle.
It can shatter in an instant.
Okay, so the next stage of the timeline shows Daniel's attempt to use the ultimate legal shield, the last resort available to a civilian in a debt crisis. Chapter 13, bankruptcy.
Right. This was a desperate but also a calculated move intended to reorganize his finances and, most importantly, protect his assets. He filed the case, number 25-33222 MVL 13, in the Northern District of Texas.
And he listed over $46,000 in liabilities. A significant amount of debt had piled up.
It had. And when a person files Chapter 13, the primary mechanism of protection is something called the automatic stay.
And this is maybe the most powerful legal tool available in this situation, right?
It's supposed to be. It's an immediate, universal injunction that halts almost all creditor actions. Collections, foreclosures, and, most critically in this case, evictions. It's supposed to be a complete stop sign.
And reviewing the initial filings, we can see his attorney, Marcus Leinart, filed a crucial document on August 25, 2025. It's called a motion to extend automatic stay.
Which was a proactive and necessary move. It was intended to reinforce that shield, to signal to all his creditors, including Preston Valley Apartments, that the federal court now had jurisdiction over his debts and his assets.
So let's detail exactly what he was fighting to save, what was on the line.
The bankruptcy schedules, they specifically list his secured and unsecured property. He was trying to protect a total of $26,587.46 in personal property.
And what does that include?
Well, it included his vehicle, the Nismo, and a documented $2,760 in personal and household items. We're talking his clothes, his furniture, all the physical remnants of those 11 years he spent in that apartment.
So for the benefit of our listener, the intention of Chapter 13 revolves around this concept called vesting. Can you explain that?
Sure. Vesting essentially determines when the debtor regains full control of their assets. The law is designed so that the property of the bankruptcy estate doesn't vest in the debtor until the case is discharged or dismissed.
So the court, through the trustee, kind of holds the assets in trust.
That's right. And that is the core legal protection he was banking on. That the court would protect that asset base while he reorganized his finances and started making payments.
Which brings us right back to the $630 tripwire. The mandatory Chapter 13 plan payment of $630 was due just weeks later on September 21, 2025. This was the first payment required to activate his new financial reality.
But here's where the failure becomes truly catastrophic. The protection failed before that payment was even due.
The eviction was carried out on September 10, 2025.
Right. And that action occurred 11 days before the required first payment was missed. And critically, it happened despite the existence of the federal automatic stay.
This alleged willful violation by the creditor, the apartment complex, that's the core legal outrage here. But the reality is, the law only works if it's enforced swiftly. And this is where we run into that concept you mentioned earlier, logistical paralysis.
Logistical paralysis, in this context, it refers to the inability of the system, so the court, the trustee, or even the debtor's own legal team, to act with immediate speed or coordination. And that renders the legal protections inert against a determined creditor.
He had the stay, but the apartment complex, whether it was through willful ignorance or just sheer administrative momentum, they executed the removal anyway.
And Daniel, in the real-time communications we have in the archive, he was frantically trying to leverage this shield. We can see the messages, the emails. He's contacting his law firm right up until a removal date, confirming the stay is in place, asking, begging for intervention.
And we see this painful mismatch in timelines.
A huge mismatch. The eviction process, that moves in days. The legal system moves in weeks or months.
So Daniel's internal timeline of chaos was car towed in March, he finally secures a job in March, files for bankruptcy in August, and then the crucial stay violation happens in early September.
The window for intervention was just tiny. He had banked on the stay protecting his home long enough for him to stabilize his income from that new job, make the payment on the 21st, and then move forward.
But the combination of that creditor noncompliance and the system's logistical paralysis just meant the federal legal shield was completely ineffective when he needed it most.
The creditor acted fast, the court system was too slow to intervene to enforce its own stay, and the consequence was the total loss of his home and all his property.
It's such a critical insight for anyone listening. I mean, having the law on your side is useless if the system designed to enforce that law can't deploy fast enough to counter an aggressive creditor.
The documents reveal this painful truth. The very legal tool designed to provide a shield was rendered useless. It left him exposed to what he often references in his personal writings as the heavy, dark, inhuman system.
And this legal failure, it led directly to the real threat of his whole case being dismissed.
Of course, if a debtor can't adhere to the plan, starting with that very first $630 payment, the bankruptcy itself is threatened. By violating the stay and removing his physical base of operations, his home, the creditor effectively guaranteed that he would miss the payment.
So they punished him for their own noncompliance. It's this brutal, vicious cycle.
And the documents, they indicate the law firm was in contact with him. They were trying to ascertain the situation, but by the time they could potentially file for contempt or try to enforce the stay, the physical damage was already done.
His property was gone. He was homeless.
The logistics beat the law. Plain and simple.
Okay, let's nail down the timeline of the material and, the psychological total loss. The physical forced removal, the eviction, happened on September 10th, 2025.
And this event, it led to the immediate total loss of all his personal property. It wasn't just losing access to it. In an eviction scenario like this, when property is removed from the premises, it's often just treated as abandoned. That leads to total forfeiture.
The sheer scale of that material loss is just staggering. We're talking about that $26,587.46 in documented personal property. The entire material foundation of his 11 years there, it just vanished overnight.
It instantly reduced his net worth to zero, except for the vehicle, which was still tied up in all this legal chaos.
And the archive, it just captures the absolute desperation and the immediate systemic collapse in his real-time communication. We have the message he sent to his law firm the day after the removal on September 11th. It's a terse, devastating status report.
The quote is just brutal in its clarity. He says, "I have no car. Red Cross gave me some help for clothes and basics since I lost everything. I'm currently homeless."
That wasn't an exaggeration. That was a factual assessment of his position.
Absolutely. The legal failure translated instantly into physical reality. No home, no possessions, only the most basic survival aid from emergency services.
And you see that connection again between the legal failure and the physical consequences. The secured asset base he was trying to protect in federal court, gone instantly because of a lack of enforcement action against the apartment complex.
And then, as if that wasn't enough, we get this bizarre, deeply ironic coda to the collapse. It just underscores the sheer weight of unpredictable fate.
Just 2 days after the forced removal, on September 12, 2025, a massive two-alarm accidental fire ravaged the Preston Valley Apartments.
The investigation traced the blaze to unattended cooking in a neighboring unit. We know 8 apartments were damaged by fire, smoke, or water. And we know that a chronic patient, Bruce Nutter, who we'll talk more about, was hospitalized and displaced by this fire.
The documents revealed this profoundly ironic coincidence. Even if the bankruptcy stay had been enforced, the home he had maintained for 11 years, the very anchor of his stability, was reduced to structural ruin and water damage anyway.
It reinforces this grim notion that his systemic failure was followed immediately by an act of sheer, unpredictable, overwhelming fate. His world was literally reduced to ashes and legal filings.
This profound vulnerability, this public and sudden collapse, it did elicit one documented external response, though.
It did. We have the email he received from Carol, a low-income housing placement specialist with the Affordable Housing Hub.
The timeline of this outreach is fascinating. The email arrived on September 12, 2025.
The very day the fire destroyed the physical structure of his former life.
Right. Carol reached out directly, offering assistance, saying, "I'm here to help you with your housing search."
It's the lone documented offer of systemic external assistance. A lifeline offered precisely on the day the ship sank completely and then burned. The timing is almost too precise.
It just highlights that lag between crisis and care.
Yeah.
Help only arrived after the physical destruction was already complete.
And even with that offer, the logistical grind continued for months. We have documentation detailing his bleak status as of mid-October 2025. Mr. Bates remained without a permanent home. He was, couch surfing, dealing with shelter placements, constantly working on the logistical nightmare of recovering what little he could.
But the documentation does reveal a small but significant tactical win during this chaos.
It does. The Nismo vehicle, the car he had fought the complex to keep through multiple impoundments, was successfully recovered on October 27th.
So he got his car back.
He got the car back. But even that recovery wasn't instant salvation. The vehicle was retrieved, yes, but the archive notes it still needed license and registration sorted out to be fully operational and legal.
So the physical and logistical struggle just continued unabated for months after the initial trigger. He had transportation, but the administrative hurdles to fully utilizing it were still exhausting his resources and his mental capacity.
This deep dive into the real-time communications, the frantic calls to the law firm, the desperate status updates, the delayed response from social services, it just shows how the speed of his financial collapse completely overwhelmed the speed of the institutions that were designed to protect him.
It's the central operational insight, isn't it? When you are fighting for basic survival, the systems you rely on, whether they're legal or governmental, are too slow, too fragmented, and too indifferent to provide a timely defense.
They don't prevent the crisis, they just process the aftermath of your ruin.
Okay, so having traced the timeline of this external systemic collapse, we have to pivot. We have to look at the internal archive, at the moral decisions Daniel made when everything else was burning down around him.
This is where we encounter the most profound contradiction that really defines that ghost persona.
Because even as his own world collapsed into homelessness, his immediate and his documented priority was not self-preservation. It was his role as caretaker for Bruce Nutter.
And we should dedicate significant time to profiling Bruce Nutter, because his vulnerability really underscores the magnitude of Bates's commitment and his sacrifice.
So who is Bruce Nutter?
Nutter is 67 years old. He's retired, disabled, and terminally ill with chronic heart disease. Economically, he is deeply, deeply vulnerable. He's living on a fixed annual income of only $12,000.
$12,000 a year.
A year. And Nutter was one of the people displaced by that fire. He was forced to stay in a motel.
And the documents, they confirm Bates's commitment immediately following his own collapse. Even while he was homeless himself, his priority in communications with the Red Cross, in housing applications he filed just days after losing everything, it was securing a stable environment for Mr. Nutter.
He was trying to ensure Nutter's well-being before his own shelter was secure. It's remarkable.
This is where the psychological profiles from the archive become so essential for understanding the sheer effort involved in that decision.
They are. The assessments show Daniel scored very high in what's called conventional interests. Now, for the listener, this means he is inherently organized, exact, detail-oriented. He prefers clear structure and duty.
Which explains his long career tenures. He's built for that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But conversely, he scored low in social interests.
And that's the key. What does that mean exactly?
It doesn't mean he's cold or uncaring, but it does mean that he finds tasks associated with teaching, training, social support, and complex emotional care to be inherently exhausting and draining. He performs those tasks out of a sense of duty, not because they're a source of personal energy or fulfillment for him.
So what does that juxtaposition mean when you put it together?
It means his dedicated care for Nutter was not a source of personal energy recharge. It wasn't a typical act of giving back that might fuel a more socially driven person. For him, it was a duty driven by this profound, internalized moral commitment and fierce mercy. And it demanded massive energy reserves from a personality that is psychologically designed to find those very tasks draining.
It's like asking a marathon runner who specializes in flat terrain to run a steep mountain course immediately after they just finished their marathon.
That's an excellent analogy.
They can do it, but every single step is pure, deliberate, painful sacrifice.
That's it. He was running on empty, performing these highly demanding tasks that fundamentally drain his reserves. This was a profound, deliberate sacrifice that just speaks volumes about his underlying moral architecture, regardless of the chaos surrounding him.
And we see evidence of the sheer administrative weight of this commitment in what the archive calls the petty logistical battles he faced while covering for Nutter.
Right. The documentation notes he was constantly fighting things like being double charged for motel rooms that he was covering for Nutter, or dealing with the administrative labyrinth of the Red Cross housing applications on Nutter's behalf.
These aren't just minor annoyances. These are constant demands on his time, his mental clarity, his attention to detail.
For a person who is trying to survive, secure a new living arrangement for himself, and fade a bankruptcy dismissal, having to spend hours on the phone arguing over a motel charge for a terminally ill man is a profound and costly expenditure of his dwindling resources.
It just illustrates the vigilance and the profound sacrifice that was required to maintain that level of care.
And this links directly back to his artistic philosophy. He writes often about the beast being this heavy, dark, inhuman system built on the seamless convergence of corporations and image.
His refusal to be consumed by the material loss, his focus on protecting the vulnerable, it's the fulfillment of his mission. Is bringing back a true story from the fire, an archive that reflects unedited reality.
He is fulfilling the assignment of Daniel, the biblical figure who survived the lion's den. He's extending fierce mercy and prioritizing others, even when he could find none for himself. The documents show the ultimate form of his resistance wasn't anger or retaliation against the apartment complex. It was doubling down on his commitment to the person who needed him most.
So let's bring this all together. The collapse of the ghost persona, Daniel Bates, the organized employee and financial anchor, it had immediate and fatal consequences for the armored DLB, the creative engine.
Right, we're talking about total operational paralysis.
And the most devastating immediate result that's documented is the cancellation of that crucial November album, Born on the 6th Bipolar Scorpio.
This was supposed to be a monumental creative undertaking. It was intended to launch the 11SIX quota for the month and drive forward the entire ecosystem's output.
And this clearly wasn't an artistic choice based on inspiration or timing.
Not at all. The logistical demands of pure survival securing shelter, fighting the bankruptcy dismissal, recovering the Nismo, and most taxing of all, caring for Nutter, they just utterly consumed the mental will required for that monumental creative output.
The archive shows the stress just spreading across the entire ecosystem. The creative wellspring just dried up because the man holding the pen was running on empty.
A 30 to 40-minute album requires hundreds of hours of focused mental energy. And that capacity was being spent on bureaucratic battles over $630 and motel charges.
And yet, this ecosystem, 11SIX Music, Neon Vision Studios, V2V, it was always designed to anticipate this kind of collapse, wasn't it?
In a way, yes. Despite his documented low score and enterprising interests, which means he doesn't enjoy building for the sake of corporate expansion, he built this autonomous architecture out of sheer necessity.
And that necessity was self-direction and protection for others.
Right. The ultimate vision has always been about transition and succession. He wasn't building a monument to himself that would crumble if he left. He was building a robust, autonomous map. It was designed to protect the artists he found and brought into the fold, the misfits, the broken beautiful ones, the lost youth that he felt deserved to be seen.
This philosophy of radical trust is so evident in their contract structure. Sophia Luna, the manager, she helped craft this revolutionary contract philosophy with him. It's basically, nobody is bound here ever. Free to go, just like you came.
That level of freedom is radical in a music industry that's built on exploiting long-term contracts and controlling intellectual property.
Gia, one of the core women in the system, she noted in her communication that he only wants people there if they want to be there, fully, willingly.
She said he builds like he's trying to patch a hole that ain't ever going to close. Instead of closure, he makes sustainable space for others. He's creating a structure that specifically works to keep people from disappearing into the very system that he just collapsed under.
And his music itself, it serves as the active archive of this struggle and this philosophy. If you dive into the tracks, he uses the platform not just for personal venting, but for public documentation.
Exactly. Tracks like Lullaby specifically mention his support for vulnerable sex workers like Lonnie and Molly. The songs are narrative threads connecting back to the survival strategies of the women in his circle.
The philosophy is clear. His music is documentation. It's a real-time, raw, and unfiltered lyrical diary.
He explicitly argues that the unedited, painful reality, the mess, is the only thing of lasting value. The goal isn't conventional healing, it's resistance. It's ensuring the archive reflects his true, unedited reality for those who might follow him.
It's an act of deep altruism wrapped in this shell of artistic defiance. The failure of his own system becomes the content for the system he is building for others.
It's a stunning feedback loop.
So let's summarize the systemic failure we've analyzed today. The initial crisis was not caused by chronic financial mismanagement, not given his long history of high W-2 income.
No, it was triggered by an external sudden job loss. And then it was fatally compromised by a systemic collapse where the legal tools designed to provide recovery, Chapter 13 bankruptcy and the automatic stay, were rendered completely ineffective.
The primary mechanisms of failure were creditor noncompliance, the apartment complex violating the stay and logistical paralysis,
which was the court system's inability to enforce its own protective order quickly enough to save the assets.
The result was the total loss of $26,587.46 in property, homelessness, unemployment, massive operational stress on the 11SIX ecosystem, and the likely dismissal of his case.
All of it stemming from a failure to enforce the automatic stay over a small, mandatory $630 payment.
It provides concrete proof of his observation that the beast is a heavy, dark, inhuman system built on speed and indifference.
And the ultimate creative cost is undeniable. The cancellation of that November album, which just shows the devastating impact of survival demands on mental will.
And yet, even in this state of profound vulnerability and logistical collapse, Daniel did achieve one crucial tactical win, documented in the archive.
The successful recovery of the Nismo vehicle on October 27th. The Midnight Runner he fought so hard to save is back in his possession. The struggle continues.
And Daniel refused to sanitize his mess. He argued that the unedited, painful reality is the only thing of lasting value, that it serves as a map for survival. And this raises a final provocation for you, the listener.
Consider the sophisticated systems you're relying on to protect your own stability. Your legal contracts, your safety nets, your insurance policies. What happens when the small mandatory payments fail? Or when a crisis demands an immediate institutional response that is met only with logistical paralysis?
The map is only useful if it shows the landmines. And this archive, still unfolding, shows exactly where the tripwire was hidden. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.